Of course, incipiently so, of course, untechnically, but it has got the message. It doesn't have to be an ideological fight between us. Just one story in this case that I've said before, but that may be of use to you. One of the reasons that I got very interested in this on an international level is because in my own country, Peru, we had for about 10 years, a little bit more to be exact, a president of Japanese origin, Alberto Fujimori. And I was always fascinated, of course. I was very proud of my country to have been able to elect somebody that was so ethnically different from the rest of us. I thought that was, that said a lot of good things about Peruvians. But at the same time, I started wondering what were the sources of this. And as I went back to see the sources, I found out that he was the son of 1 million families of Japan that migrated to South America, of which 2 countries had their open borders to Japanese migration. One was Peru, and of course the biggest one was Brazil. And and then my question was always, now, why did Fujimori come to Peru, and why did Nawata go to Brazil? Why didn't Toledo go to Japan? Why didn't Lula go to Japan? And the reply to that is because the GNP per capita of Peru and Brazil was 3 times higher than that of Japan in the 1945. In other words, you can have a Japanese elite with destroyers, with airplanes that already build Nissan, but it could also be 20 to 30% of the society. And so what happened with Japan in the afterwars, but that's too much of a story to tell at this moment, is that basically they revamped their whole legal system and made it inclusive. And by making it inclusive, they destroyed the feudal system, and they made a country where everybody can participate in enterprise, where everybody's got the same property rights, where everybody's got the same business organization rights. And now, when Fujimori went back to Japan for a short spell of 5 years, he found a country 15 times richer than Peru. And they managed that in 50 years. And it's that lost lesson of the importance of certain legal institutions to bring in the majority, not waiting for things to trickle down, but asking ourselves the question, is it enough to simply wait to trickle down, or do people need certain basic instruments, which the Westerners, the North Atlantic countries, cannot teach it because they did it too long ago. The guys that could give us a story behind the importance of the law are the great-great-granddaddies of the North Americans we know. The present ones are not very interesting. They think that they did it themselves. They even think in some cases that they're culturally superior, when in fact what they've got is a very good legal system that allows them to actually create wealth. And nobody's going to learn that except ourselves. So you can imagine the glee, the happiness I had when we in Peru heard that Luis Alberto Moreno was going to find out how to give the majority opportunity. I can think of no more revolutionary task. Thank you very much.
Have a lot of time. We're almost at time for the next session, and I think that has to do with the fact that you gave an absolutely fascinating discussion, and we learned a lot from it, and maybe we can have a few questions. One question I have here is, it would seem that the vertical economic gap, top to bottom, in addition to that, we need to close the horizontal political gap, right to left. Any suggestions? Example, private sustainable microcredit financial institutions promoted on the basis of one economic philosophy become threatened with heavily subsidized public microcredit programs. Any comments on that?
Well, a few comments come to mind. One of them is, and the part I like most about your question is about closing the left-right gap. A lot of our ideological divisions in Latin America are basically imitations of a division that is European and only pertinent to Europe and not to us. Many of us basically want the same thing. In Latin America, we always talk about the left and the right, when the real problem is the top and the bottom. And the fact is that both people on the left and on the right are motivated by the same things. I know that a lot of Peruvian leftists are basically as shocked, as pained as I am of the enormous social and economic divisions you see. What they, of course, don't know is because, to a great degree, of course, they have been taught to fight against big business, and they have seen big business exploit, which is also true, is that the major exploitation comes from not actually giving the poor the same instruments that big business has got. On the other hand, you've got a right that talks about a series of values as if we were already there, as if everybody had the same opportunity. It doesn't make a sense to be a conservative, for example, from my point of view in Latin America, if there isn't much to conserve in terms of institutions. So you don't want to be a conservative. You want to be a progressive, whatever you are, because it's obvious that things that they stand cannot last. So I think there's a lot to do in that direction. And of course, but that will, I think, come, you know, when the information comes in. When, if, for example, the IDB now continues a task which we have been doing in excellent collaboration with Don Terry and the people of FOMIN, the Multilateral Investment Fund, of coming out and saying, you know, this part is proletariat, this part is entrepreneurs, and there's no way they're going to make it. Just those numbers should start bringing the left and the right together.
Thank you. One other question, and I think we only have time for one other question. This is someone refers to you as Hernando, someone who clearly knows you. You've been telling this story for a long time. What is needed for governments to begin to make changes needed to set people free? Who needs to be convinced? And if I might add, what can the IDB do as part of that as well?
Well, what the IDB can do has already started actually a few months ago, because we wouldn't have done this study if we hadn't, as I said before, begun mechanically working and putting together all the resources that are huge, by the way, that need to be put together to get data that is not on books, data that has actually got to come from the grassroots. So the very fact that now we've got for 12 Latin American countries what we call a pre-diagnosis, a pre-diagnostico, which the summary of which you have got in your fact sheet, the more bulky details per country individualized, which can be obtained from the Inter-American Development Bank or the FOMIN, and which will be found many of them in the web. Those start giving you a first map of what's going on. I mean, you wouldn't imagine a general deciding to fight another nation or a terrorist group without a map. The first thing you got to do is find out what is where and how do I move my pieces. So this is the map. And it's a first map. The second thing that can be done, which we've talked about with both Ambassador Moreno and Mr. Terry, is how do we then progress to do this in full for each nation? In other words, to get a very precise map. We've already got 3 Latin American countries that have actually come in and said, let's have that map, and then start preparing alternative strategies to bring in each country everyone together and change the legal infrastructure without scaring those who are already fruitfully investing, but yet including the other ones which aren't, on the basis of local strategies and on the basis of what has worked in history. And that means bringing the history of North Atlantic countries together. Let me just add, I know that you're in a hurry, but let me just add one little sample that,
no, this is good.
that brings this to light. You know, we always feel that the United States has like been a great country all of the time. You look at some of their films, and you know, they were great since about 200 years ago, but it's not really that way. I just got sent a speech by a university professor in the United States. Not being a professor, I need professors to give me the information. A speech by Abraham Lincoln in 1836 when he was a congressman. And he was riding in a buggy, in a one-horse buggy, into St. Louis, Missouri. And he then gave a speech to the Young Leaders Association of St. Louis. And he said, I am so chagrined, I am so absolutely sad, because as I rode into St. Louis, and I tried to look at the sunset, it was about 6 p.m., I wasn't able to see the red sun for the amount of corpses that were hanging on the boughs of trees, like curtains, like Spanish moss. And these are all the corpses that are the result of conflicts over territory and property rights. We've got to civilize ourselves. Now, there's always this sort of feeling that the United States learned everything from Britain. It's not true. The United States actually built up its property system on statutes, 32 preemption acts, from the beginning of the 19th century until the last act in the 1870s. And then it kept on modifying it with GI bills, etc. But it was built. They also included a majority. And there are things that failed, and there are things that succeeded, and they're not in the law books, and they're not in the instruction manuals of the United States. And they will never be written to the satisfaction of a reformist Latin America unless Latin Americans write it up for themselves and find out what works and what doesn't work. We can't expect the North to do it. And I repeat again, this might sound like propaganda, but I have something of the beast in me. I think this idea of the Inter-American Development Bank taking the leadership, you know, we so-called intellectuals and researchers doing it is all great. You can pick up a book at an airport, and I'm very grateful for your compliment. But if the president of the Inter-American Development Bank picks it up and puts it on a shield there, I'm really much more impressed.
Yes. That was terrific. Thank you.